Hey there, and thanks for joining us for The Weekly Grind, a podcast where we work out the topics that shape and influence the culture, community, and church of today from a biblical perspective. My name's Ben, here with my pastor and good friend Chip. He's the lead pastor, and I'm the worship pastor here at the Napoleon Church of the Nazarene. Today on the podcast, we welcome Kaitlin Helberg. She grew up here in Napoleon and is now one of the Napoleon High School art teachers. And Kaitlin shares with us a little bit about her calling and how God has used her creative ability, actually, to both in the classroom and around the world for his kingdom. So this is The Weekly Grind, and this is Called to Create. All right, well, I'm excited about this podcast today. I think I say that at least half of the time, but...
All the time.
Yeah. All the time.
But you better be excited about it.
I know. Maybe I'm excited about everything that we talk about.
Some more than others, though.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Every podcast we do is my favorite one, and so today is my favorite one. And we're joined with Kaitlin Helberg today, and we're tackling a topic that I'm passionate about with kind of the line of ministry and work that I do and I'm a part of every day and the calling that I live in. But also I married someone that is very similar to the same vein that you're going to be speaking from today as well. And so I'm thrilled about this conversation that we're going to have. Thanks, Kaitlin, for taking the time to just come on today. And it's just the idea of just using our gifts, using our talents, our abilities, and creating in the way that God created, right?
Yeah. You know, I think to me, watching you guys go about this, my whole understanding has just been broadened. One of my favorite verses, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, says, we are his workmanship, right?
That's a good one.
And I like to speak on that verse because the more I begin to understand that word, I begin to understand that we are his work of art. And you can't help but look at this world and see a God who is creative, who went above and beyond just normal, just the vast amount of animals. You can go to all different parts of the world and see amazing things. And you're just like, wow, God is so creative. Yeah. And then he says in his word, we are his work of art. We are his masterpiece. Mm-hmm. That he is taking delight in creating in our life, right? Yeah. And I began to realize that people like Ben, people like you have a special role where you call attention to this creative God. And that in doing so, you bring people into, I think, better focus about who God is, his glory, his nature. And in so doing, you, I believe, are evangelistic in nature. And I think a lot of people would just look right past that so often. Yeah. But I think just getting to know people that are called to create in this way, it's opened my world to the role you're playing in the world. So I think you have a lot to say to us. Yeah. I think you have a lot to share that we need to see, we need to understand.
Yeah. So. I think even just in the creative nature, the creative nature of God, we're introduced to that right away in the Bible. So it's obviously something important in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. And then, a little later on in Genesis, it talks about we're created in his image, right? We're image bearers. So when we look at God as a creator, that means we're a creator. And so many times we might focus on some of the other attributes of God, which are all amazing. God is holy, and God is just, and God is loving, and God is good. But we don't often think about God as creator. We kind of have sometimes this stiff-necked idea of, God is this very tight and orderly. And I've said this before, if you think that God didn't have fun while he was creating, I think you're dead wrong. I don't think there's any way. We were just reading in one of Cohen's books last night that there is a bird who is, there's a spider who is made and looks like bird poop. And it does. And it draws insects to it. And I'm like, God, you're so funny. You are so cool, that you made a spider that looks like, and I'm sorry, that's a weird example, but there's just so much amazing creativity to creation. Yeah. And it gives you an insight into God, God, you are the most creative, like the most amazing artist.
You just said
Obviously
poop on our
ever.
podcast.
I know. I'm sorry.
My son Colby's going to watch the podcast.
Well, he should look up that spider that looks like bird poop because that's what I.
No, he'll
we
just love
looked
the
up
fact that we
last
use
night.
the word.
I'm
sorry.
I don't know.
No,
You
it's
might- you
good.
might
I
look it
love
up
it.
on YouTube or something.
I'm going
Check out
to.
It's
spider
amazing.
videos.
It really is amazing.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And so, Kaitlin, maybe if you can just share with us a little bit of your story, a little bit of your background, and then your calling.
Yeah.
Because, that's one of the things that we were talking about before this is, so often, people, I think it's maybe they put, pastoral calling, and while we'll be judged at a higher level, it'll for what we teach and what we preach and that calling. Yeah. The priesthood of all believers is real, and we're all called to share the gospel, and we're all called to, to give our lives to Christ, and then to use the gifts that He's given us. And so, as a high school art teacher, as a mom, and as you're using these, and even other projects, you're using your gifts and your talents. So walk us through that calling, and just maybe just your last handful of years here.
Yeah. So I have always been a maker just since I was little, and when I say maker, like obviously that includes art things, but even when we talk about creating, we a lot of times focus on art, and there are other ways that you can create. Creating is anything where you're making something new, right? And so, I mean, from the time I was little, I was always painting, crafting, things like that. But I also, I remember making perfume one time out of things from the house that I thought smelled good. So just things like that. I know, bizarre.
That's cool.
Bird poop. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We're just getting all kinds of stuff on here. And so kind of like growing up, I knew that's kind of where I fit, but I wouldn't say that my understanding of how that played into like ministry really came until later. I actually went into art in college, and I kind of had a moment in college where I was making something, and I've always loved making things, but I'm like, man, is this really all there is? Like, I'm just going to make something, for what? Like, what is the purpose of this? And so that's really the first time where I kind of discovered, like, my personal convictions to draw attention to things that matter. And so in college, I created a series of work that I call the Adopted Series, in which I was really directly speaking about moral issues and just kind of our call for adoption and caring for people and the inherent dignity of every life. And so I kind of thought that I had figured out, I guess, where my creative niche was. And at that point, it was really like I had to be directly speaking about the things of God in order for art to be valid. Well, obviously, when you become a believer, like, God just kind of keeps bringing you into the fold, right? And He keeps teaching you things. And so I had like almost these little, I don't want to say breakdowns, but almost like these little crises every so often where I'd be like, what in the world are you doing? Like, you're an art teacher. How is this making the kingdom, furthering the kingdom of God? And so I was doing some memory verses with my kids, and I really wanted to focus on our identity in Christ and our identity in God and who God made us to be. And so as I'm doing that with my 2-year-old and my 11-year-old, and I'm also memorizing them myself. And so I realized, like, you're made in His image. And I remember at one point kind of asking God, like, God, why did you make me like this? Like, why did you make me why am I not a doctor? Why am I not reaching the tangible needs of someone? And then He brought that verse that I was doing with my kids to me, and He said, hey, you're made in my image. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is, like, I'm made in your image for a reason. This isn't just you're creative and that's an aside. Like, this is part of who I've made you to be. And so just in that realization of figuring out who I am in Christ and my identity is based in Him, and because He's a creator, I'm a creator, it kind of freed up that really legalistic view that I had of creating, where initially it was like I had to create and everything I created had to be directly about God or it wasn't valid. It kind of allowed me to step back and be like, no, when I create, I'm creating and I'm glorifying Him because I'm imitating Him and I'm reflecting His character. And so, yeah, that has just really kind of changed a lot of things. And I would say God probably thinks I'm very dense. He doesn't. But it just took a long time, for that to happen, for me to kind of understand that. And so that really has impacted, just the way I work. And now, and I still do things that are that are more directly speaking to God and His goodness, and kind of more as like a mission aspect. But I also do things understanding that, like, if I'm creating to glorify Him, even if it's a fun project in my classroom, like, that's reflecting His character, His creative character, and that's a good thing. And I'm drawing attention to Him. So, some of the things I've done, just I do try and do some things that are directly, I would say directly furthering His kingdom. I don't know if that's really a good way to put it, but we do like the Empty Bowls project in school, where we will sell bowls, and then the money goes back and it gets donated to some kind of a hunger organization. We've worked with different hunger organizations in the past. We just worked with Pillars for Success in Henry County recently. We've done the Memory Project, which is a national project where you do portraits for kids in kind of war-torn areas. And so then those are given to the kids. And then most recently had a really cool opportunity to do some portraits for some girls down in the Dominican Republic that we met while we were down there on a trip, on a missions trip through the church. We're excited I'm actually going to go back in 2 weeks to the Dominican Republic and deliver those portraits to the girls. So
wow, I didn't know that.
I'm sorry.
So
2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
So I want to sit
3
on.
weeks.
I want to sit on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Dominican.
Yeah.
The whole Dominican thing, because we sent a team down. Was it 2 years ago? Probably now or so.
This past summer.
Oh my goodness! This past summer. It's crazy how fast stuff moves though when God starts to put His hand on something, because. So you went down with that team, and share with us a little bit the beginning of just how He started to show you ways that you could to do this.
Yeah. So I always say God is so cool, and He's just so intricate and so complex. We never. Even when you know that, He still works in ways that are totally unexpected. So prior to going down, we were doing the Memory Project with my students, and I always try and do a portrait with them. And so we were working with some girls from Afghanistan, and I just had a lot of fun doing that. Like, we don't always do a lot of work ourselves. I teach art, obviously, so sometimes I don't always go home and do my own pieces. So I was doing that, and I was having a great time with it. And I'm like, you know what? I wonder if my fellow art teachers would enjoy doing this. And so I just sent out a text and said, hey, would you guys want to do this? Like, I think it might be kind of fun to do together, just as a motivation to get work done, because I'm not always motivated unless I have that good thing outside of myself to do it for. So they all were like, yeah, I think that sounds really cool. And so the plan was to just figure out, I would get emails regularly about, hey, we have this group, the portraits would need to be done then. And so the plan was, we're just going to wait and we'll find a timeline that works for us. So fast forward, we go on the trip to the Dominican. I had no thoughts of that at all in my mind. And we go to a girl's home, which is an amazing story of a woman who's just so obedient and filled with the Spirit. I mean, you can't walk away from that story and not realize like that is her calling on life, and she is being filled in the Spirit every day to do the job that she's doing. But anyways, we were doing a craft project with the girls, and I was kind of in charge of the craft project, and I was walking around just like I do in my classroom, and kind of making sure that everyone understood what was going on. And so then after a while, I decided I was going to sit down and start connecting with the kids. And so there was a girl that was just doing some little doodles on like a scrap piece of paper that was there. And so I obviously can't speak, and so I kind of gestured like, oh, drawing. I think I said la música, which is just terrible Spanish, because she was drawing little music notes. But then I did like a really, really quick portrait of her. I kind of like motioned sit up straight, and I did a super fast portrait of this girl. And so she got really excited. I mean, it was like a 2-minute portrait. And so she gets her friend, and she goes and gets a new piece of board, and she now like really sits up straight and just faces me, like posing for her portrait.
But for real, we got time.
Yeah,
let's do this.
Okay, let's do this for real. So she, so I end up drawing it for her, and she was super excited. And pretty certain there's a line of girls, and I think I only got to maybe 3 or 4 by the time we left. They each took 5 to 10 minutes, and so it kind of hit me like, oh my goodness. Like, God, this is what you had planned all along. Oh, man, I wasn't going to do this. It was just so amazing the way He works, that was not even on my mind, but He planted something in my heart and then fulfilled it in a way that, like, I hadn't even ever thought of. And so I kind of said to the guy in charge, I said, hey, I think we can do portraits for all these girls. There's about 40 girls there. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. My art teacher friends and I, like, we've already talked about it, actually. It's already planned. It's already set up. Like, we'll do the portraits for them. And so we came back later and got pictures for them. And so it was just a really cool experience, and just an amazing way that God works, in our lives with the Ephesians 2:10, just the good works that he planned for us to do long ago. And like, what a great example of, if I don't have to know what all those good works are, but if I know what my calling is in and I know what gifts I've been given, like, he will set up the good works for me. And if I make sure that I'm staying in the Spirit and step with the Spirit and remaining in him, like, he absolutely will show me those things along the way. So I don't have to worry about what are the good works that I'm going to do.
I mean, you had something,
perfect.
something that's on your heart in one area, and then you're obedient to going on this trip in a totally other area of your walk with him. You didn't have the intent, but the way that he webs all that together when we're obedient to him. You were going to say something?
No, I think that's perfect. Like, even the end of that verse, like preparing the works beforehand. That's cool. I hadn't heard that. Like, I heard some of that, but I hadn't heard the whole. Like, so you're going back in a couple of weeks? Is that to take the portraits?
Yeah, to take the portraits down. So we could ship them, but I would like to see the girls again and just.
You got to get video of that.
We will. Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
I'm actually one of the other art teachers is going to go with us. I was trying to get as many people to go as possible, but it worked out for her to go, and so we're really excited to go and deliver those to the girls, and So.
And so often, we lived because we were like, man, God, I want to use this to bless others, and I can hear it in your voice, like, you're blessed.
Yeah.
And I try to tell people that if they're thinking about even going on a mission trip somewhere or something, it's like, yeah, you're going to serve and to love on others, but you have no idea what God has in store for you personally.
No, absolutely.
And the ripple effect that your obedience can have on communities around the nation, because I mean, that orphanage, but also, we had an exhibit here. We had, it was open to the community. These portraits, and so it's really neat to see, because I think art and so many other things, they can transcend. Music's one of those. You can transcend language, and you can transcend just things that, and it's just a means for advancing the gospel, right? And so when we live in all things, a holistic obedience to him, it's crazy the doors that he opens for us.
I love that phrase, draw attention to, because I mean, art does that. It draws our attention, does it not? I haven't been in the past, like I couldn't tell you a lot of the famous artists, but being married to my wife who loves that stuff, I now have been in more art museums than I ever would have been. I mean, and so, but just knowing, like, walking through a door in an art museum into a room where it's just this big room, and then there's these paintings, and they just draw your attention in, right? And I think that it's amazing how using that gift of creativity, it's drawing attention to something, and it's drawing attention to a creative God.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt that those girls will be forever impacted by that, because in your being creative, as God is creative, and using that talent, you drew value to them. Like, just the fact that they feel that value, that they're, and that's like you were saying, it's ministry that's being lived out just by being your creative self.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I kind of want to go.
Sure, you want to come? There's one more spot.
To get out of the snow around here, man, I'd go just about anywhere. Like, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, what I guess next steps for me, I always think of just like some pieces to end with.
Some takeaways for somebody.
10, 15 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Wait, So what would I right now tell myself from 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give? You feel like you've got this, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
You are totally putting me on the spot.
So what do you? But think of maybe even your students.
Yeah.
You have a student that you see yourself in this student,
Right.
and their heart to serve God.
Yeah.
Through this.
Yeah.
What are some of the things, maybe empty bowls or other things, like what are ways that you encourage them?
Right.
And yeah.
So something we talk about with my students is, first of all, I talk to them about, like, you guys know that you are meant to be creative. We kind of live in a consumerist society. And so there was a time when I kind of stepped away from creativity. But it really, like, I had to come back to it. I mean, it's part of who I am. And I really honestly believe that, if we're made in the image of God and God is a creator, everyone's a creator in some language. So, I tell my students, you got to find what that language is. You have to find what your creative language is. So for me, it's art. Honestly, I just discovered this about my husband, and he listens to this, so I hope he hears this. He's going to be mad that I said this, but he loves plumbing. Like, he actually got done, and he doesn't really know that I was, like, listening to it like this, but he got done with a plumbing project, and just wait for it. There was nothing there, so we just renovated a house, and he got done. He's like, I love this. Like, there was literally nothing here when I started, and now this is a working sink and a working system.
Yeah.
And so it's just that method of, like, making something out of nothing. And again, a lot of times we really, like, we qualify it and say it's only art-based things, but really, it's ideas. It's maybe it's forming a sequence of ideas of something, like just having that creative output. So I talk to all of my students about that, and a lot of the students that I see are creative artistically.
Yeah.
But even in that world, they kind of have a specific language. So I said, be true to yourself. If you're a doodler, like, figure out what that doodling is. Take it somewhere. Don't feel like you're trying to fit in the mold of another artist. Like, you are who you are, and kind of run with that. But the other thing I would totally tell myself is stop worrying so much and trying so hard. I think, and I think I'm not the only one, but, like, a lot of times we worry about what are those good works? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? We worry about, am I doing enough? Instead of just saying, like, God, I'm obedient. And so, like, right now, am I in a really specific project where I have, like, a dead set vision of what I'm doing? No, I don't. Like, I don't have a project that I'm necessarily working on, but I know that these are my gifts, and I'm staying obedient to, like, God, I'm meeting with you every day, and I'm growing closer to you, and I know that you're gonna open doors at some point for something new, and whatever that is. And so I'll just say, like, chill out, stop worrying, stop trying so hard, like, be obedient, stay in God, remain in me. That's one of my favorite verses, John 15:4. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch can't bear fruit if you're severed from the vine, nor can you bear fruit if you're severed from me. And so I just stay in that. Like, God, my job is to remain in you. My job is to know that these are my gifts, and you're going to open doors along the way for me to work. So,
my son has taught me more about the Father's love than in the last year and a half than I've understood about it in my whole life, from the way that he sees me. Yeah. And just don't try so hard. He just wants your obedience and your presence. He values that. Yeah. And so, if you can just live in that, he's going to open doors for you, and he's going to show you what he has for you. Yeah. And it's way better than anything you could have imagined, and live in that. Yeah.
Which I would say, just, like, you do have an ongoing project all the time.
You mean in school?
As a teacher,
yes, absolutely.
Like, you are the I no doubt you're probably the catalyst for a lot of people in this area. And so that is a project, right?
Well, right, yes.
But something other, I know what you're
kind of
saying.
a daily thing, you know what I mean? Like a daily, that's the daily project, the daily mission versus, like, a very specific. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's so good, and just encouraging, and like you said with Brian, even. I mean, whether it's gardening, whether it's doing things with your hands in different ways, it's not painting, and it's not just music. No. It's so much more than that. Yeah. And you said a phrase a few minutes ago, and I just loved it. But just that idea of just being able to create something out of nothing, and I built a shed last summer, and, like, it was just so cool to be
Right.
able to feel that sense of achievement and
Yeah.
accomplishment and
And joy.
And joy.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much joy that comes from, even plumbing your house.
I know. Now, I
Yeah.
don't want to make him sound like he actually loves art museums. He loves
Yeah.
going and seeing those paintings. And
4 hours. That's my
That's
max.
4 hours. That might be my max, too.
I've learned that. Well,
It's impressive.
4 hours?
When Kristen was going through high school or through college
Yeah.
courses and stuff, so she's studying this and all excited. I think she could have gone longer.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% done after
Yeah.
that long.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I am really a rookie, man. 2 hours.
That's probably
2.5.
way closer.
And
to
that's
where I'm
even
at now.
like
We've been
Chicago
married,
Art
5 years,
Museum.
so I'm a lot closer to 2 hours probably because I don't have to.
You're not trying to impress
I don't
anyone
have to
now.
impress and please that. Hey, you're excited. Look at me. I'm excited about this stuff
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But I've learned to say I appreciate that.
Yeah, right.
If
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't-
absolutely. I tell my students that all the time. You don't have to love everything you see, but I do appreciate where they're coming from, and I appreciate the idea that they had because it was a new and different idea.
Even
And
the banana duct tape to
even the banana duct tape to the wall.
that
Or
got
the,
eaten.
or the toilet signed by an artist, or we could just dazzle you with all of the crazy art projects that
Yeah.
are going on. So.
I do think back to just want to, again, capture like the joy that comes from creating and living in that. God delights
Yeah.
in seeing us like him, the joy he has
Yeah.
in what he formed out of nothing and
Right.
all of this. And so I think he delights in us just, whatever language it is
Yeah.
of creativity, speaking it and feeling joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that looking on, people, that does touch people's lives. That does, it communicates.
Yeah.
When you see somebody that's just full, they know who they are, what they're supposed to be doing. They're just joyful. That's, again, drawing attention to why. And it's easy to say, hey, that's the way God wired
Yeah.
me. Isn't he great?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And again, it's all back to drawing attention to a creative God who's amazingly creative. And that's a beautiful thing and a joyful thing.
Well, hey, thanks for engaging with us in this week's episode of The Weekly Grind as we tackle the topics of today from a biblical perspective. If you found today's topic or any episode valuable to you and your growth, it'd mean a lot to us if you would leave us a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to stay caught up on every episode of the Weekly Grind podcast. Thanks so much, and we will see you next time.